Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling a hurdle that literally every researcher wrestles with at some point, attributing survey data. Let's be honest, citing surveys can kind of feel like navigating a maze without a map, right? You've got different types of surveys, totally different publication methods, and these highly specific rules for each one. But getting it right, that's non-negotiable. So let's just dive right in, demystify this whole process, and give you the definitive guide to survey attribution so your research is absolutely airtight, credible, and professionally sound. So how do you actually cite a survey? I mean, it's a simple enough question, but the stakes are incredibly high. Look, nobody wants to deal with accusations of accidental plagiarism or, getting a paper rejected over some tiny technicality in a bibliography. Yikes. And unlike a standard book or a journal article where the path is pretty clear-cut, surveys kind of exist in this messy middle ground. They might be these massive data sets or just tiny appendices in a larger paper or even something you created entirely from scratch. To give you a totally foolproof framework, we are going to look straight at the source material. And that brings us to our golden rule. The treatment of a survey depends on its source. It really is that straightforward. You absolutely cannot apply a blanket rule to every single survey you encounter. The way you handle the attribution changes fundamentally based on exactly where that survey came from and how it was distributed. So you always have to ask yourself, wait, is this my data? Is this someone else's published report? Or is it just the questionnaire itself? Hitting the nail on the head regarding the source is exactly what dictates the correct treatment. Now, when we're looking outside our own original work, this whole decision tree basically branches into two distinct external sources. On one side, we've got a published survey report. You can think of this as the final product. The data has already been collected, crunched, and put out there into the world. On the other side, we have a survey instrument. Now, this isn't the final data. Rather, it's the specific questionnaire or the set of prompts that another researcher designed to get their data. Because these are two completely different tools, they require completely different treatments. Okay, let's say you're dealing with a formally published survey report. You've got to categorize it into one of three formats: a report, an article, or a data set. If the survey was released as a big, standalone document, well, you cite it as a report. If it was published within the pages of an academic journal, it's an article. And if you are actually pulling from the raw, compiled numbers themselves, then it's a data set. Making sure you match your citation to the right format is absolutely crucial for giving your readers total clarity. But what if you aren't actually using someone else's data? Say you stumble across their questionnaire and think, wow, this is absolutely perfect, and you want to use that exact survey instrument for your own study. Well, you can't just casually mention that you used a survey. No way. You have to trace that specific tool all the way back to its origins. You really need to acknowledge the intellectual labor of the researcher who carefully crafted those questions by pointing your readers directly to the original published source where that instrument was first introduced. Now, what if the survey isn't external at all? What if you actually designed and administered the whole thing yourself? In that case, you get to bypass external references entirely, which is pretty nice. Instead, you just follow two key steps. First, you describe the how and why of the questionnaire right there in your methodology section. Second, you reproduce the actual instrument in an appendix. Doing this allows your readers to see exactly what you asked your participants, so you've got total transparency, but it keeps the main text clean, neatly tucked away at the end, rather than cluttering up your external reference list. All right, going back to when you do have an external source, you really need to capture its exact anatomy. Whether it's a report, an article, or a data set, you need those core details. We're talking the author or organization, the year of publication, the title, and the publisher. And depending on the exact format, you'll probably also need the version, the data set identifier, and for sure, the DOI or URL. Gathering this kind of structural DNA right as you're doing your research, trust me, it will save you massive headaches when it comes time to finalize that bibliography. Now, knowing the anatomy is great and all, but let's be real, manually formatting it can still be incredibly tedious. If your work requires the Harvard referencing style, there's actually a great tool you can use, the Harvard Reference Generator. You literally just plug in all those anatomical parts we just talked about, like the author, year, title, and DOI, and it instantly builds a perfectly correct reference. It's an awesome way to take the heavy manual labor out of formatting, freeing up your time so you can focus on the actual, analysis of your data. Actually, scratch that. Let's pause here for a really crucial distinction, because this is a big one. Online generators absolutely do not override your local guidelines. We really have to draw a clear line between the standard universal citations and your own strict institutional rules. Your university, your publisher, or your review board, they have the absolute final say on ethical disclosures and exactly how your appendices need to be formatted. So while the universal rules tell you what to cite, Your institution is ultimately what dictates the final structural boundaries of your paper. So, we've covered a lot today: the decision tree, the exact anatomy of a citation, and those strict institutional rules. But I want to leave you with this. If your survey methodology and sources aren't properly documented, can your research truly be trusted? Proper attribution really isn't just bureaucratic busywork. It is literally the backbone of research integrity. Categorizing datasets accurately and transparently reproducing your methods, that's how you build real trust with your audience. And honestly, that's the main thing that separates just good research from truly reliable, world-class work. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy researching.